Hello everyone. In this session, we want to take a look at Active Directory Federation Services. Active Directory Federation Services is developed by Microsoft and can be installed on the server operating systems. The role that Active Directory Federation Services play is to provide users with what we call a single sign-on access to systems and applications located on organizational boundaries. What does that mean? Well, if we have two organizations, let's say organizational A and organizational B, and organizational A wants to gain access to some resources on the second organization, the user is able to sign on and access resources in the second organization without actually logging on to that second organization, because the Active Directory Federation Services server in organizational A provides what we call claim authentication in the form of tokens and sends these tokens over to the Active Directory Federation Services server in the second organization. Let's take a look. On the left, we have Company A. We refer to Company A as the accounts partner. Company A is the company that is going to perform the authentication of the user. Within Company A, we have an enterprise certificate server, we have a domain controller, and we have an Active Directory Federation server. The Active Directory Federation server in Company A is the server that is going to issue the tokens to Company B. So Active Directory Federation server in Company A collects and authenticates the user's credentials. It builds up claims for that user and package the claims into what we call a security token. And then that token with the claims is presented to the Federation server in Company B, and the Federation server in Company B will then look at the authentication token and determine whether or not it will let that particular user or users access the local servers in Company B that contains the resources. This allows a system to provide controlled access to its resources or services to a user that belongs to another company without requiring that user to authenticate directly to the system, and without the two systems sharing a database of user identities or passwords. Let's pause a moment to explain what we mean by claims-based. A token usually contains the user credentials, which would normally be the username and the user password. But when we use claims, we can use other things that will identify the user. For example, we can have a claim that contains the user's name, the user's role within the company, the user's age, the user's signature. And all of that is packaged within the token And each piece of information is something about that user that identifies the user. So in addition then to the username and password, the claims allow us to identify that user. The federation server in company A is referred to as the relying party trust, since that server configures the claims and issues the token. Turning our attention to company B, the resource partner, the company that has the resources, we're going to be referring to that Active Directory Federation server as the relying party. The Federation server in company B will validate the tokens it receives from company A, and it will issue another token for the local servers to accept that claim identity. Now, we might have our resources on a web server in company B, or we can actually have that website installed on the Active Directory Federation services. But we also need a domain controller in company B. We'll use the security tokens to decide whether or not the users will be able to access the web servers in the company. And there are some things that we need to look at with this ADFS resource. If an Active Directory Federation server is to function as a resource, then the web servers in company B must either have Windows Identity Foundation installed or have the Active Directory Federation Services Claims Aware Web Agent role installed. A very simplistic look at the whole process would be that a user would log on to their local PC as they would typically log on when they're beginning work in the morning. Now that user needs to obtain information on a partner's company's website. For example, the user might want to obtain information about pricing or product details. So the user then navigates to the parties or to the partner company's website, the partner being company B. Company B website does not require for that user to type in a password. Why? Because that user's credentials would have been passed to company B using Active Directory Federation services, so that the user will now be logged into company B and can interact with the website as a logged in user. We want to now take a look at the installation of Active Directory Federation services and some of the components of that role. From Server Manager dashboard, we're going to click on Manage, Add Roles and Features. On the Before You Begin screen, we're going to click on Next. On the Installation Type screen, we're going to click on Next. And we have the server selected, so we can go ahead and click on Next on the destination server. And the role we want is Active Directory Federation Services. So on the roles screen, we're going to click on Active Directory Federation Services. And we're going to pause a minute to look at the description. Active Directory Federation Services provides simplified, secured identity, federation, and Web Single Sign-On (SOS) capabilities. ADFS includes a federation service that enables browser-based web SSS single sign-on. So we're going to click Next to continue. On the feature page, we want to click Next. And we want to note some things about ADFS. The first thing that we want to look at is that the computer must be joined to the domain before you can successfully install Federation service. The Web Application Proxy Role service in the Remote Access Server role functions as the Federation service proxy and cannot be installed on the same computer as the Federation service. So we want to keep those things in mind when we are installing ADFS. Again, we take a second look at the description that we have here on the Add Roles and Feature Wizard page. Remembering that we're using Active Directory Federation services because we want to have a single sign-on between two organizations so that if one user wants to access resources in a partner organization, the user only uses one sign-on, one single sign-on, because the user's token is authenticated on the Active Directory Federation server, which will then pass that token to the partner organization, so that you don't have two separate databases of users, one in the partner organization and one in your organization. So we need a single sign-on. We want to click Next to continue. And at this page, we need to confirm the installation by clicking Next. And we have to configure the Federation service. So you can see the note here to configure the Federation service, because after you do the initial install, there's some additional steps that are required so that Active Directory Federation services can be installed on your machine. So we're going to go ahead and configure the Federation service. There's some things that you will need. You must have an Active Directory Domain Administrator account, and you also need a publicly trusted certificate so that you can have SSL server authentication. Below, we can create the Federation service farm, or we can add a Federation server to a Federation server farm. Since we're installing ADFS for the first time, we will need to select the first option, create the first Federation server in a Federation server farm. So we're going to go ahead and click Next. And here you see we have to specify an account with Active Directory Domain Administrator permission to perform the Federation service configuration. And we have our lab admin user So we're going to choose that. We're not going to change it. We're going to click next. And we need the SSL certificate that we talked about. We can either import one, or if we have one, we can simply click the down arrow here, and we're going to do that. We're going to choose the server 1 certificate. And we're asked to put the display name that the users will see at sign-in. And we want to call this Contoso Corporation. So we're actually going to type that name in the box using our on-screen keyboard. Contoso Corporation. And we want to click on next to continue. On this specify service account, we need a service account, and we can have a group managed service account here, or we can use an existing domain user account. So we don't have a service account, so we would need to select one. So we're going to click on select. We're going to look for one. Click on advanced, find now, and administrator. We click on OK. Click on OK a second time. And we have to type the account password. So we're going to click in the password box, and we're going to type the account password, which is password PASSW0RD and exclamation mark, which would be shift and the exclamation mark. Let's just collapse the on-screen keyboard and click on next to continue. We're asked on the next screen to specify a database, and we can either specify Windows internal database, or if we have an SQL database, we can choose that, but we'll have to put in the database host name and the name of the database instance. For our lab exercise, we're going to choose the internal database. So we're going to go ahead and click next. The server that we're configuring will be the primary server in the ADFS farm, and we're going to be using the internal database. And we should note here that these settings can be exported to a PowerShell script. If you want to automate additional installation, you can use that script. We're going to click next to continue. Prerequisite checks completed. All prerequisite checks passed successfully, and we need to click configure to begin the installation. We're going to note here that before we can use Active Directory Federation services, we will need a machine restart to complete the configuration. Any other messages that we have here, we can configure those when the installation is complete and we restart the computer. But you will see messages here. When you restart your machine, you can then reconfigure any error message that you see here. So we want to click on close. And we would have restarted our machine. We now want to just take a cursory look at some of the components of Active Directory Federation services. So we're going to click on Tools, ADFS Management. On the left, we can see the components, the tools that we'll be using to configure ADFS. To configure the claims provider trust, the relaying party trust. In the middle pane, there's some tasks that you are told that you have to do. So once you do the installation, you have to configure the relaying party trust and the claims provider trust. And we're going to do that in another session. Here we're simply looking at some of the components. Let us take a look at the Service tab. Just click on the Service tab and we're going to expand it and look at some of the services that are offered. We can see that we have here our endpoints, and we manage the endpoints using the Service tab. Let's click on Endpoints. In Active Directory, and you can see your endpoints here in the middle screen. In Active Directory Federation services, your endpoints are the URLs that provide access to various services such as issuing tokens and publishing Federation metadata. Let's take a look at certificates. Click on certificates. And we see here that we have three types of certificates. We have the Service Communication Certificate, and this certificate is used for Windows Communication Foundation Message Security, WCF. And before you can configure ADFS, the certificate must be installed as an SSL certificate on the default website of the local instance of IIS. Then you have the token decrypting certificate, and this certificate is used to decrypt tokens the Federation server receives. Then you have token signing certificates, and this type of certificate is used to sign tokens the Federation server issues. We want to take a look next at claims descriptions. And we can see the claims descriptions that are being used there. Through the claims description node, you can find information about the claims the local server is currently able to assert about the identities of users. The Claims Provider Trust node here, let's click on it, allows you to manage the trust relationships of the federated service. Here on the actions, we can add the Claims Provider Trust. We can also take a look here at application groups. Under the Actions pane, we can add an application group. The service, under the Service tab, we also have Relying Party Trust, where we can configure the Relying Party Trust. Click on Relying Party Trusts, and over to the Actions pane, we see that using this console, we can add a Relying Party Trust. We can also configure access control policies under the Service tab. Let's click on Access Control Policies. We see here that you can have your permissions. You can set your permissions. You can add access control policies. So we've taken just a look at some of the services that we can perform in Active Directory Federation services. Remember, we have to create the Relying Party Trust or configure the Relying Party Trust. We also have to configure the Claims Provider Trust. We can do access policies. We can also configure authentication, and we're going to look at those things in another session. For this session, we simply looked at the installation of the Active Directory Federation services. We looked at our prerequisites, the things that we would need if we're going to install ADFS. We also looked at the console and looked at some of the components here on the services, and also looked at some of the trust relationship services that we can configure within the Active Directory Federation Services console. This is the end of our session, and I want to thank you for listening.